Hey, DawgNation, happy Monday to you. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. There is so much to do on this show, a lot of it reacting to what leaks out, what is said, and what's really in many cases confirmed by Georgia coach Kirby Smart from the scrimmage on Saturday. Obviously, the big headline to come out of that, the fact that Arik Gilbert, the recent UGA transfer, was not there. We'll react to a lot of that Gilbert news off the top of the program today, including what some of the trolls on the internet are trying to say about Georgia and Kirby Smart throughout all of this. We will touch on that, and I'll explain to you why maybe some of the bigger news related to this scrimmage was not actually related to Gilbert. We'll do all of that. There's also huge recruiting news to get to on today's show, too. We'll do that. Our buddy John Stinchcomb stops by in between all of that. So what do you say we get it started? DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
By now, most of you are aware of the news over the weekend. Georgia did have a scrimmage, kind of a dress rehearsal to get ready for the 2021 season. Arik Gilbert, the recent transfer from LSU and one of the most talked about members of the Georgia roster, was not spotted during that scrimmage. And in the aftermath of that, there's obviously a lot of chatter. And what I'm going to tell you on the show today, at least I'm going to try to make the case for, is that I don't believe that Gilbert's absence represents the biggest concern from Georgia coming off that scrimmage on Saturday, but it is certainly the biggest news, right? And that's the thing you have to kind of combat here off the top of the show, because there is clearly no doubt of, no lack of, trollish type media folks and just folks ready to kind of make a narrative out of the fact that Gilbert was not there on Saturday. So let's kind of walk through all of this. And similar to what we said about Scott Cochran the other day, we're going to have discussions here that run on parallel tracks. On the one hand, there is the personal concern we have for Gilbert for whatever it is that's, causing him to be away from football right now. And that's very real. And that's something we're not going to shy away from mentioning in a discussion like this. But also, we're not going to fail to acknowledge this is also a football show for football fans who care about a football team. And it's just human nature. They can't help but wonder how all of this news impacts the team they want to watch starting September 4th against Clemson. So we're going to do our best to walk both those parallel tracks when it comes to Arik Gilbert and what happened there on Saturday. As far as what did happen, Georgia coach Kirby Smart, in his press conference on Saturday, did explain the situation involving Gilbert, him not being there, from the perspective of the head coach. This is what Kirby Smart had to say.
Eric's dealing with some personal issues. We love him. We're thinking about him. We're trying to help him. When you think about a medical staff like Ron Corson has, he has so much experience in dealing with these issues. Our thoughts and prayers are with him right now as he deals with those personal issues, and we hope to get him back soon.
So a personal issue that kept Gilbert away from the scrimmage on Saturday, and when Smart says we hope to get him back soon, obviously one of the things you read into that is a little bit of an open-ended scenario. This isn't, for instance, minor physical injury where you can say, oh, it's 7 to 10 days, it's 2 weeks, and there's a expected timeline. When it comes to things like this, at least the assumption you make on what Kirby Smart's talking about right there is there really is no expected timeline on all this kind of stuff, because listen, a lot of us, me included, have dealt with things that may fall into a similar vein of what Gilbert might be going through. And I think most of us would say, hey, a lot of this is really open-ended. A lot of this really is kind of to be determined about when you're going to feel better again, and when you're going to be able to kind of rejoin the aspects of your life that you value and you care about. So you kind of understand why Smart leaves that little bit open-ended there at the end of that audio clip there. Now, there is a right way and a wrong way to talk about things like this. Let me give you an example of what I believe the right way to discuss something like that is. Our buddy Terrence Edwards, who you may remember we asked on Thursday about Arik Gilbert, because at that point in time there had been lots of rumors and lots of chatter and lots of discussion, knowing that Terrence knows Gilbert as well as he does and frankly loves Arik Gilbert as a mentor to him, Gilbert being someone that Gilbert has looked up to Terrence, of course, for a long time there as well. There's a lot of mutual respect there in that relationship. We gave Terrence a chance to talk about Gilbert when he joined us on Thursday, but also on social media over the weekend, the great former Georgia wide receiver put out a message that most people have interpreted as maybe being about Gilbert. Terrence Edwards saying that athletes are real people too. I think people forget that sometimes. I think that's a good reminder from Terrence Edwards about the situation with Arik Gilbert, that listen, when a guy is dealing with something like this that takes him away from football, that's not what Arik Gilbert wants to be true. He doesn't want to be dealing with this as opposed to playing the game that he loves. He'd rather be out there with his teammates being a part of this scrimmage and enjoying life as a young man. So clearly whatever has happened is not the plan that Gilbert had for himself. It's just the kind of thing that's erupted here. And I think that Edwards' words there are a reminder of how this should be discussed. However, I would say there's also kind of a wrong way to talk about this kind of thing. And I think you see an example on social media of certain people, including the example I'm about to give you, of trying to score the cheap points, trying to turn this into, fodder for a hot take, fertile soil for a big, bold opinion, and maybe a chance to kind of come after Georgia a little bit too, for reasons that I'll get into in just a moment. Think about Danny Cannell here, who's essentially a professional SEC troll as it is, and sometimes because Georgia's a high-profile program within the SEC, some of Cannell's ire is going to be turned on Georgia from time to time. He retweeted himself yesterday, which is never a very classy thing to do, I think most of us would say, but, kind of using the news about Gilbert not being at the scrimmage on Saturday as a way to kind of draw attention to himself and some things that he said about Arik Gilbert before. Let me read this for you on Twitter. So this is what Cannell tweeted on June 1st, that coaches should value character as much as star ratings. Selling your soul just to get talent with checkered past can be risky. But I guess at some point you just throw caution to the wind and it gives you a sarcastic go dogs. That was a reference to Arik Gilbert because June 1st is the moment when Gilbert came to UGA. And what Cannell tweeted on Sunday was a reminder with the ellipsis after that, about what he said there on June 1st. Here's the problem. This is why Cannell is such a dope for what he tweeted. No one's ever questioned Arik Gilbert's character. What Kirby Smart's describing this as a personal issue. And can I see the tweet just one more time from, because I want to make sure I get the language right here. The idea that somehow Gilbert has a checkered past. Transferring out of LSU is not enough to make something be a checkered past. It's loaded phrases like that from Danny Cannell that I think are going to cause a problem for a lot of people. That when he talks about, Gilbert being someone of poor character, someone with a checkered past, my message to Danny Cannell would be this: you better have the goods to prove what you're saying there. You better have the goods to use such aggressive, loaded language, because from where I'm sitting, what you see is a guy who's apparently dealing with some things here, but it doesn't make him a bad person. It makes him a person like the rest of us, just trying to make sense of his life, especially at a very young age. And listen, I'm not going to pretend like Gilbert's movements and whether he's playing football or not, that it's not going to get a lot of attention. As I said before, we're all human beings. It's human nature to want to give this kind of thing a lot of attention. But for Danny Cannell to say that somehow Gilbert's absence on Saturday proves that he's a person of low character with a checkered past, frankly, I think that's a pretty despicable thing to say all the way around. But it's not just guys like Cannell who've said at least similar things here. Somewhat less caffeinated version of the same kind of take came from Cole Kublik on the SEC Network. And as I said before, what Cole said back in the summer was nowhere near as volatile on all of this, but it is a reminder that there are people watching Georgia very closely here. There are people paying very close attention to what Georgia has done by bringing in Arik Gilbert, and there are people openly questioning about whether or not it was even a good idea. Let me show you the tweet from Kublik earlier in the summer when he says, the moment that it was found out that Gilbert was not going to Florida, where he was initially intending to transfer, and instead coming to Georgia, what Kublik put on Twitter, and of course you know him as the SEC Network analyst, is that I see we're missing the same point with Georgia that we did with Florida a few months ago. And Cole's not making it obvious what he's referencing here. Some people took that to be some sort of statement about Gilbert's academic standing or things like that. But the fact is, Smart has said that from an academic standpoint, Arik Gilbert is in good standing and ready to go there at UGA. Whatever he's dealing with right now is not related to that. So if you're a Georgia fan, you're obviously paying close attention to this, and you can't help but notice that there certainly seems to be, whether it's a relatively mild statement like what Cole Kublik had, or a much more, cartoonishly bombastic statement like Danny Cannell, that there are people waiting to pounce on Kirby Smart about the Arik Gilbert situation. And you're left to wonder, well, why is that? I mean, listen, here's the one thing that Kirby Smart's going to always have going against him in the eyes of some people. Smart's just really, really aggressive. In some cases, more aggressive than maybe the average coach would be. He's relatively young in his tenure there at Georgia, But he's not content to simply wait his turn to be one of the younger up-and-coming coaches in college football. No, he's aggressively worked to try to get himself to the top of the sport as quickly as he possibly can, hoarding elite 4- and 5-star talent, being as aggressive in the transfer portal as almost anyone, continuing apparently to recruit Arik Gilbert even after Gilbert had made his pledge to Florida. These are the kinds of things that put a sign on Kirby Smart's back in the eyes of some, because it's always going to be uncomfortable for some in college football when a young up-and-coming coach is that aggressive, when a young up-and-coming coach is that unwilling to wait his turn for the good coaches ahead of him to just get old, retire, flame out, whatever else, and it'll be Kirby Smart's time to have the spotlight solely on him. No, Smart seems pretty committed right now to moving himself up the ladder and moving some of those other guys out of that spotlight as quickly as he possibly can, and you're going to get some critics when something like that goes down. Here's the other thing I think needs to be said. I think for some Georgia fans, it makes them mad when they hear Cannell saying, what he says there and what others may have said about Gilbert in the past. I think for some Georgia fans, it actually makes them nervous of, somehow, some way, Georgia must have done something wrong if you've got people saying this about Gilbert. And the fact that Georgia brought Gilbert in a high-profile fashion and now he's not scrimmaging on Saturday, somehow, some way, that Georgia must have done something wrong by doing all of this. But don't believe that. Don't believe there's some sort of guilt by association for Georgia simply because it brought Gilbert in, and now Gilbert's having some sort of issue personal that it's been described as by Kirby Smart that's keeping away from football right now. There's just simply no such thing for Georgia as guilt by association when it comes to this. The fact of the matter is, when you go back and listen to some of the things that Orgeron had said about Gilbert in the past, he was dealing with some issues apparently while he was at LSU. So Georgia, by bringing Gilbert in, knew there was going to be some potential that some of whatever may have been happening at LSU was also going to linger for him there at Georgia. But for the Dogs program that desperately needs playmakers, and Gilbert has the potential to be one that can certainly shine, this was always an experiment worth trying for UGA, and it remains that way here even right now. And if you're someone who wants the best for Gilbert, and we all should, the idea that Gilbert has a chance to get what he needs this much closer to home at a program like Georgia that's set up pretty well to handle these kinds of things. I would say history proves over the course of the last couple of years, maybe better set up for this kind of stuff than LSU is. Once again, it seems like for Georgia on the field, an experiment worth trying, and for Gilbert off the field with the things that he needs in his life, the kind of program that he has the potential to benefit from being around. So, first of all, I think you have every right to be upset when you got trolls like Danny Cannell saying what he's saying, and every reason to believe that this relationship, Georgia with Gilbert, may still work out fine. With that in mind, let me play one more audio clip here for a moment. Let's go back to Todd Monken on, I guess it was Thursday afternoon. This is prior to the confirmation that Gilbert being away from the team, but there were rumors about this. We knew that Monken would be asked about Gilbert because that had just been the hot topic on the rumor mill going back over the course of the last few days. And there was something that Todd Monken said about Arik Gilbert going back to Thursday that still kind of lingers with me as the hope that for Gilbert off the field getting what he needs, Georgia on the field, frankly, also getting what it needs, that all this stuff may still work out okay. Let me let you hear Todd Monken going back to Thursday.
I think he's adapted well. He's a special talent because he's in the Brock Bowers mode, and that he's athletic enough to play receiver, but big enough to do some things on the interior. He's a size matchup. He's a run after catch guy. He loves to play the game. So, we're excited that he's part of our program.
So two things there. Obviously, nobody disputes the value that Gilbert potentially has for Georgia, and as a football show, we care about that. But what Monken says there at the end is the thing that if you want something good from Georgia to have Gilbert back playing, and you want the best for Gilbert to feel better than he currently feels now, listen to what Monken says there at the end, the idea that he, quote, loves to play the game. I've told you a million times before, I know this sounds kind of corny or, Pollyanna-ish or naive or whatever else, but I truly do believe this is true, that football is an incredible mechanism for positive improvement in your life. For the young guys who get a chance to play this at the major college level and all the resources that go in these programs to bettering the lives of the players who are lucky enough, privileged enough to really be a part of this, it's just amazing the kind of change agent football can be. And you want football to be in Arik Gilbert's life, whether it's Georgia or somewhere else, because that's the thing that can eventually make him maybe feel better than he feels now or alleviate the personal issue that Smart describes that he's currently going through. You believe that football can be that for him. And the fact that, as Monken says, that Gilbert loves the game, loves to be a part of it, that eventually that might be the kind of magnet that pulls him back towards the game and pulls him in the direction that he needs to go in his life. And not just for Arik Gilbert, for a lot of other players there as well. So I take Monken's word seriously. Nobody disputes that Arik Gilbert is the kind of talent that could eventually help Georgia. Frankly, that's why we've talked about him as much as we possibly can. But we also believe this, that to be a part of a team, to be a part of a sport, also has the chance to benefit not just Arik Gilbert, but all the players get a chance to come through a program like this to really help them go the next place they need to go in their life. College football can be powerful that way, and I'm certainly rooting for the fact that it can be powerful in that regard for someone like Arik Gilbert there as well. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and glad to have you with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, on the page of DawgNation.com there as well. Podcast, the Apple Player, Spotify, the Google Player. Some of you listen right there on SoundCloud. Some of you like to see the show posted there at DawgNation.com. You click on it right there. However you get to us, thanks for doing it. Of course, on the radio at noon on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. We appreciate you being with us there for that as well. Good to have all of you with us today. Big thanks to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. They can equip your house with energy-efficient windows and doors. It's something they're great at doing. And what we love about Pella there as well is the fact they really bring the best of two different worlds to you. They're a nationally known company, so you get unparalleled resources, but they're also a locally owned branch right here in Georgia, so you get that family-oriented service there too. I love both those things about Pella Window and Door of Georgia. They give you a no-pressure consultation. They offer you some expert advice on how one of those Pella experts can really answer all your questions and let you know the next step for you in getting those windows and doors that your home deserves. How about some great savings there as well? Pella is currently offering to replace all your windows with payments as low as $99 a month. That's based on a $10,000 purchase at 84 months if you qualify. So a couple different ways to get in touch. Check them out online, the website pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. Or give them a call at 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is viewed to be the best. All right, really good stuff on today's program. We're going to do some of this with John Stinchcomb in just a moment. We'll find out from John what he thinks about the Gilbert situation and kind of what's next for Georgia, all of that coming up. There's also really huge recruiting news, both good news in terms of Bear Alexander's final two, maybe bad news, at least for now, in terms of Deion Bowie and the pledge that he gave out over the weekend. We will cover all of that before we're done on the program here today. But before that, let's go around the doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA. And I said this off the top of the program, and I want to kind of pay off on this right now, that while the Gilbert situation not being at the scrimmage on Saturday is probably the biggest headline and it's generated the most conversation, I don't believe it's the most significant issue that Georgia faced here this past weekend. And I want to try to explain to you why here just for a moment. On Friday's show, we talked a lot about kind of the idea of thin slicing, and sometimes a little piece of information tells you all you really need to know. And what I said about Georgia on Friday was, I kind of only need to know how much fun the offense is having. If it looks like they're having fun, if it sounds like they're having fun, then the odds are they're probably scoring a bunch of points. If they're scoring a bunch of points, they're probably winning a bunch of games. That football at the highest level of the college game right now just sort of looks fun. The games are more entertaining than they've ever been. The offenses are more prolific than they've ever been. The kind of cockiness and swagger that comes from being a part of something like that tells you all you need to know, that if Georgia looks like they're having fun, then we're probably all having fun because Georgia's winning a bunch of games and things like that. Well, unfortunately on Saturday, the vibe that you get from the Kirby Smart press conference after the scrimmage, some of you saw this with your own eyes, maybe you can attest to this, maybe you can, but the vibe that you got on Saturday was, boy, it might just not have been very much fun. And by the way, for reasons that have probably, frankly, very little to do with Gilbert. Yes, Gilbert would have been nice to have there, but the struggles of the Georgia offense on Saturday, to the extent they took place, certainly cannot all be pinned on the fact that Arik Gilbert was not a part of what went down there. In fact, let me give you some audio of Kirby Smart giving his first-person perspective on this. Maybe a day that JT Daniels was not at his very best overall. Mitigating factors possibly, but nonetheless a situation worth at least considering. Here's Kirby Smart on his quarterback and the offense that he led on Saturday.
He's not playing with a full deck, if you follow what I'm saying. He doesn't have all the weapons out there. Fitz was actually out too, so Fitz has got a foot sprain, and so we didn't have all the arsenal there. And JT understands that. He understands that we're going through the process of making good decisions, and I'm really pleased with where JT is and his leadership and commanding the offense. But I think he'd admit that he could have a better day than we had today, and he knows that. That's not all on him. That's on everybody, including me, offensive staff, and all the guys to keep improving.
So, I mean, honesty compels me to admit that while it's only one scrimmage and it's not even a game, you don't make too big of a deal about it, and there's plenty of reasons why the offense may have struggled. No Kearis Jackson, no Jermaine Burton, things like that, no John Fitzpatrick. What Kirby Smart just described there, the audio clip that you play, boy, that doesn't sound that fun, does it? And for us to have spent as much time as we spent talking about an offense with swagger and strutting up and down the field, that wasn't that from Kirby Smart on Saturday. Instead, it was explanations for why the offense maybe wasn't moving the football as well as some of the donors who were there, or maybe hoping they got a chance to see that. A lot of the scrimmage also took place behind closed doors, I'm told, because of some bad weather, but still. The audio clip there from Kirby Smart, frankly, not all that much fun. You just have to be honest about that. The other thing that comes up is the fact that the Warren Ericson injury is causing a lot of shuffling with the offensive line. And suddenly we've kind of gone from a situation at Georgia where it was, is Jamari Salyer going to play left tackle to help protect against those dominant Clemson edge rushers? Does he play his more natural position of guard? Well, all of a sudden now, because of the Warren Ericson injury, for however long that lingers, all of a sudden there's a new variable thrown into the situation with Salyer. Once again, this is true and it's important, but frankly, to think this is the chatter a couple of weeks out from Georgia Clemson, to be completely honest with you, is just kind of not all that much fun. This Kirby Smart again.
You know, with Warren Ericson being out, we've worked Jamari and Van Pran both with the ones at center, which has allowed us to work other tackles. Roderick has worked at tackle with Jamari bumping inside some, and Truss has been able to work some at tackle and guard. Amarius has been able to work at tackle alongside Warren McClendon. Center is one of those positions that you can't play with. You better have a center because the play doesn't even get started without that. So Blasky has worked there. Jared Wilson's even worked there some, but primarily it's been Jamari and Van Pran as we work to get Warren back.
Kirby Smart's 100% right about this, that center is a very important position. It's the kind of thing that you can't afford to be experimenting with because it has the tendency to just kind of derail your entire offense. But it also speaks to the extra challenge that Georgia's facing. Where to put Salyer was already a big question because there was a little bit of concern that you might be vulnerable if you're Georgia at the spot in which Salyer's not playing. All of a sudden now there's a third spot that Salyer might need to be. In fact, you get the sense that Salyer was participating some at center during the scrimmage on Saturday with the first-team offense. All of a sudden you see an offensive line that's probably got more issues that it's dealing with 2 weeks ahead of the season than you wish was possibly true. Doesn't mean that it derails the game against Clemson or the rest of the season, certainly, and Ericson may be back sooner rather than later. But for Georgia on Saturday, the offensive concerns, as we said, unfortunately, extend far beyond just the fact that Arik Gilbert was not spotted there. That is around the doghouse. It's assisted today by our friends at AAA. Of course, when you think about AAA, and I'm about to be on the road for a lot for this upcoming football season, high school games on Friday, college games on Saturday, coming back in many cases on Sunday, obviously looking forward to enjoying that legendary roadside assistance from AAA in case I have some sort of issue. But that's not the only thing that I think about when I think about AAA, and my encouragement for you is to also expand your horizons when it comes to AAA there too. How about auto insurance? Did you know that when you switch and save your auto insurance with AAA, you can save on average $529? That's real money. That's big savings and a big difference when you switch and save with AAA today. So check out the website. It's AAA.com/auto insurance. That's AAA.com/auto insurance. You can switch and save with AAA today, and it's great to have them assisting us with Around the Doghouse here today. All right, a lot more for us to do on the program. A bunch of recruiting stuff, interesting development in the soap opera that is conference realignment and the battle for power in college sports. We'll talk about that before we're done. But for now, on the Gilbert situation, what's going on with the Georgia offensive line, and kind of where things are just a couple of weeks out from a huge season opener against Clemson. Let's get it all with John Stinchcomb right now. Let's do a classic City Logger Insider update and find out where the things stand with the Dogs. Good to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Boy, lots to talk to John Stinchcomb about today. So much going on with Georgia, and seems like, as I said before, you don't want to overreact too much about a scrimmage that wasn't even a game and only a few people got a chance to see, and who knows how the rumors on something like this are even true or not, but it seems like Saturday presented its share of concerns for UGA. John, let me start with the position group that you certainly know very well, having been a part of it. with Jamari Salyer having to work in at center at times because of the fact that Warren Erickson's banged up, a hand injury to his snapping hand, the fact that all of a sudden we've gone from saying, hey, Salyer's either going to be a guard, his natural position, or a tackle, a position that he played pretty well a year ago, to now adding a third variable into that, thinking you may have to play him at center because you need one right now. How much does that concern you as a former offensive lineman getting ready to watch his alma mater against a great Clemson defensive front?
Well, it's a big concern because Clemson's strength is in that front. I mean, they've got some ball players, buddy. They can hurt some teams if you can't answer the bell. And yeah, we all knew that Warren Erickson is that glue in the middle, and that losing him, especially this time of year when you're trying to figure out who is this best five, who are these players in addition to Warren and Jamari that are going to help and fit in. And one of the biggest questions we had coming in is where's Salyer going to end up? And with Harrison going down, it didn't provide clarity. It muddled the waters even more. And I think we're seeing the effects of that, especially in the scrimmage. I mean, there is all reports indicate there was a lack of cohesion there, and it makes a lot of sense. But just an untimely injury in a position group that needs continuity and needs to kind of develop an identity, and haven't really had that opportunity yet. Just whether it's personnel issue is going to make it sound worse, but personnel as in figuring out who the best five are in the right spot and being able to rep that again and again, it just hasn't happened yet. So health is always a factor, but also identifying what's the route that we're going to go heading into week one against Clemson, and being able to get the time on task for the guys up front.
And the other thing that I think you have to say here is that Cedric Von Prawn, elite recruit, kind of a top 50 type recruit from previous signing class, that's a pretty big time guy to bring in, and likely Georgia's center of the future at some point in time. But it seems like you're reading tea leaves here on this. If they're talking this much about Salyer possibly being that center, then it sounds like the assumption you might make is that Van Pran's not quite ready for that role against an opponent like Clemson. If Erickson's not ready to play, am I reading too much into that if I'm saying that right now?
Well, possibly, but not really. I think it might be maybe an indicator that they're guards that are better prepared, maybe a little further along, maybe a little better understanding. But anytime you're looking at a guy in Salyer who played tackle all year last year and has already taken reps at guard, and you're introducing this third position, it certainly makes you wonder why, right? And I think the easiest answer is that you've got better answers at tackle and guard than you do at center right now.
One more thing on this, and I promise we won't keep the same conversation going the entire time we're doing our Classic City Logger Insider Update here. But the other thing that kind of comes to mind with all of this is you and I talked about Warren Erickson last week. I'm of the belief that Erickson was really very solidly in that role as starting center based on the way that he was treated during the spring, based on some of the chatter that came out about Erickson there at the time. And unfortunately, if it's not Erickson, if it's Salyer now playing center, and all of a sudden someone like Xavier Truss starting at left tackle, no disrespect to Truss, but to me that seems like, at least in my mind, on paper as I understand it, a lesser offensive line than the one that would have included Erickson at center, maybe Salyer at left tackle with Tate Ratledge as likely your right guard, with Bedrock's Schaefer and McClendon filling out your starting five. Unfortunately, the Salyer at center offensive line to me seems like a lesser line on paper than the one that we've been commonly discussing. Is that unfair?
Well, hopefully that's not a scenario that plays out. I think with the Erickson injury, there's some haze and lack of clarity as to the extent of it, but it doesn't seem to be long-lasting, and the sooner you can get him back and get a settlement across that front five, the better. I think they just need to get more reps. But, yeah, I think the offensive line looks a heck of a lot better with Erickson in the middle, and then only one other new face outside of Schaefer, Salyer, and McClendon.
It's a Classic City Lager Insider Update with John Stinchcomb. Let me move on to what has been the hot topic over the course of the last couple of days since it was found out that Arik Gilbert, the recent transfer from LSU, was not at the scrimmage on Saturday. John, you know this because you've been around the block. There are critics waiting to pounce on Kirby Smart for even bringing Gilbert into the program and waiting for something to go wrong with something like this so they could say, see, I told you so. We even had some examples of that earlier in the show. I'm not all that worried about that from a football fan perspective. I think it's an experiment worth trying, and I think that Georgia's the kind of program where Gilbert could potentially find a home, and certainly he's the kind of talent that Georgia can eventually use if whatever personal issue that he's dealing with can be worked out here. I'm not worried about any kind of negative press or negative hot takes, things like that. I simply don't think they matter very much. What is your take on everything that's going down here with Gilbert? Much of it unknown. The one thing we do know is he simply wasn't there on Saturday. What do you make of all this?
Well, the first thing is you get a chance and an opportunity to bring in a player of Gilbert's caliber. You jump at the opportunity, and there's no second guessing and looking back and saying, oh, they should have. Well, I'm pretty sure they did as much due diligence as possible in trying to garner an opportunity and take advantage of an opportunity of adding such a great player. Now, how it works out, nobody really knows. I certainly have no idea what he's dealing with other than what I've read, and that's exceptionally limited. So to speculate as to the depth and legitimacy of the concerns that are being expressed across some of these boards and Twitters and those kind of things, time will be the best judge, and we'll be able to figure out and get a better handle on what he's dealing with and how that factors in. But, up to this point, again, it's just been a bizarre training camp. You lose Coach Cochran, and now with Gilbert out, there's some just uncommon lack of access for folks that otherwise you would have full expectations to be fully contributing to this team.
It's our Classic City Lager Insider Update with John Stinchcomb, trying to figure out everything that's going on with the Georgia Bulldogs before they get ready to take on Clemson here coming up in a couple of weeks' time. One thing we don't need any issues trying to figure out, we already know this, that one of the things you're going to enjoy as you get ready for the upcoming season is some of that good cold beer from our friends at Creature Comforts Brewing Company and Classic City Lager. It's a lighter lager-style beer, which means it's easy to drink, but there's no sacrifice on flavor for this whatsoever. Classic City Lager is just good cold beer. It comes in 6, 12-pack cans. Wherever you're doing your shopping on a weekly basis, you can pick up some right there. It's a taste of the Classic City, Athens, but you don't have to be in Athens to get it. You can get it wherever you do your shopping. I think the can looks great. It looks good in your hand. Boy, one of those good cold cans feels good there as well, especially hot weather like we have this time of year. So make sure you check some out, try it, stock up your tailgate for it, have yourself a good time as we head towards the season. Some Classic City Lager from Creature Comforts Brewing Company. Make sure you check out some good cold beer from them there today. It's available year-round, by the way, so make sure you enjoy all of that. So, John, here's the other thing that I'm kind of left to, consider with all of this related to the offense. And once again, this is kind of under the category of honesty compels you to admit that some of the chatter of, oh, gosh, there's only one football. How does Georgia spread the ball around to all these playmakers? How do they get everybody involved? I'm not trying to be sarcastic, but it seems like some version of this happens every single year where you go from thinking, man, Georgia's got so many potential playmakers that you can't get them all involved. You can't use them all. And you finally get to the point where the season's actually getting ready to begin, and you kind of arrive back at the same spot you typically are, which is actually Georgia's like most teams in the country, just trying to figure out if they have enough potential playmakers to do the things they need to be able to do this year. And that's not unique to Georgia, but we're just kind of obsessed with this program, and so maybe we ride that roller coaster ride a little bit more than maybe some other folks do. But that's kind of the point we are here with the UGA right now. It's not this huge wealth of wide receivers, and it's simply which ones are on the field at any given point in time. It's, do you have 3 or 4 that you can really depend on, especially when Kyrus Jackson and Jermaine Burton are back healthy again? The same thing for a deep stable of running backs. They all look like they can play, but of this group, which couple can really give you the dominant performance you need to move the football once again against an opponent like Clemson? That right now this offense has some of the same kinds of unanswered questions that the last couple of years for Georgia have seemingly presented. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'd say this. It's the deepest roster I think Georgia's ever had. And the reason for, do we have enough footballs on the field? I kind of get that argument this year more than any other. But at the end of the day, you're right in thinking that once you get out there and you figure out who you can go to on a consistent basis, it certainly sifts itself better. But it's a deep roster, and those are two position groups that, one, the running back that Georgia has recruited well and has kept loaded for quite some time. They've been able to manage that in the past. I mean, we've always had, especially in recent history, at least two very viable backs. You think of DeAndre Swift behind Nick Chubb and Sony Michel back in the day. We're three deep of NFL caliber, top-notch running backs, and they were able to manage expectations between the three of them. Similar to what you have now in the backfield, I think the only addition to that equation is the fact that for the first time, we have a number of wide receivers that we feel like can make plays, but none of them, they all haven't been available at the same time yet. So that's still an unknown as to who really is the guy we can go to on a Saturday and who has just been kind of hyped up in this offseason.
John, always a great conversation. I certainly appreciate you being a part of it this here today on our Classic City Logger Insider Update. Can't wait to speak to you again as we get even closer to that Georgia-Clemson game and all the fun that's going to be had as Dog fans start heading towards Charlotte. It is almost upon us, and just a couple more of these rumor mill cycles to endure before we actually get some real football on the field.
Oh, we're so close, but yet there's such fodder right now that, it's manufactured a little bit, but there's also some stuff that's come from Athens that has fanned the flames of speculation and concern and discourse. So it'll be interesting and beneficial for all of us, I'm sure, once we get to actual football.
Yeah, John, I think that's well said. Good stuff. Thanks for being here. We'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Looking forward to it, BA. Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
I think John makes a lot of sense with what he says there. And it leads me to say this, not to put words in John's mouth, but what it leads me to say based on what John said there was, for a team like Georgia that prides itself on avoiding distractions at all costs, and almost everything around the program is designed as a way to limit distractions, the fact that there have been a couple of potential distractions here over the last couple of weeks seems a little bit un-Georgia-like and the kind of thing that's going to get some attention. As I said before, people can criticize Kirby for bringing in anybody they want. I truly don't think that matters here. What matters is what you do around that, right? What matters is what you do with the players that you do have available. And I hope that Gilbert is one of those guys that Georgia does have available at some point in time. But if he's not, what do you do then with the other guys? That's what really matters. And ultimately, that's the criticism that one way or another sticks with Kirby Smart. Trying to be aggressive and going out and getting a former 5-star as a transfer, knowing that, it was not 100% maybe certainty of what he'd be able to contribute for you here this year. Experiment worth taking. I think it has the potential to benefit both sides. I think it still does have the potential to benefit both sides. But ultimately, the criticism or not that's going to stick with Kirby Smart is what you do with the players that you do have available. Can you create an offense? Can you create a program around the guys that you do have available for the upcoming year? We'll talk more about that in a moment. I also remind you, as we head towards the start of the football season, we also head to one of the big sporting events that happens in Atlanta each and every year. It's the Tour Championship returning to East Lake Golf Club the week of Labor Day weekend, coming up there the September the 2nd through the 5th. I've been there for this event before. I've been to East Lake. Was lucky enough to be there a few weeks ago there as well. A beautiful course, a tremendous backdrop for really the championship event of the PGA Tour. The PGA Tour had its final regular season tournament yesterday. We move into the PGA Tour playoff portion of the calendar right now. By the way, shout out to Kevin Kisner. We'll do more of that in a moment before we're done on the program. And it all culminates right there at East Lake Golf Club on September 2nd through the 5th with the Tour Championship finale right there. An amazing chance for you to see. First of all, we know that Harris English is going to be there. Other guys like Chris Kirk, Brian Harmon, even Kevin Kisner there as well, working their way into that field to be a part of that final group there at East Lake. Going to be a fun time. Also great saving as well. 2 youth tickets can be admitted free with a ticketed adult that's anyone 15 or under. And, of course, military members and a guest can register for complimentary admission there, too. So good stuff all the way around there. Check out tourchampionship.com for more details. That's tourchampionship.com for more details. Let me say this. For those of you that want a dose of positivity, tomorrow we're going to really have that. A very strong interview on our show tomorrow with Peter Burns and the SEC Network. And I'll tell you how all of this came together. So we were talking the other day on the show about how, I'd said that there hadn't been a lot of big names with big followings picking Georgia to win the national championship. And some folks reached out to say, well, actually, B.A. Peter Burns from the SEC Network, he has picked Georgia to win the national championship. So we reached out to Peter to say if he would mind coming on the show and kind of making his case for Georgia winning the national championship. Peter, very glad to do that. We actually recorded this on Friday. We would have played it for you today, but there's so much going on, we just didn't have time to do that. So tomorrow we'll kind of kick off the show with really good stuff from Peter Burns on the subject of Georgia winning the national championship, why he believes that's going to happen. So that'll be really good stuff tomorrow. We're also broadcasting live from the Corky Kell luncheon tomorrow as the Corky Kell Classic for the 30th straight year gets ready to get going in the Atlanta area and across the state of Georgia here this weekend. I'm lucky enough to be on a part of the call for a few of those games. So we'll preview some high school football and let you hear from Peter Burns on tomorrow's show. That's going to be really good stuff. Speaking of high school football, let me deal with some recruiting news here for a moment as we move into our SEC through. So over the weekend, Deion Bowie, former Georgia commit, 5-star from Bainbridge, Kirby Smart's hometown, but also the hometown of Nick Williams, the former Georgia staffer, now working as a staffer at Texas A&M. Bowie announced that he was committing to Texas A&M. You know, this is obviously the next step in all of this process. In fact, let me show you on the screen here, Bowie to the Aggies here for a moment. He shows you the committed to Texas A&M, wearing the maroon colors for the Aggies. And listen, I'm not going to pretend this is nothing to have him committed there to Texas A&M. My assumption is it's not over between Georgia and Bowie. My assumption is this commitment will still be, this recruitment will still be ongoing here. But it is a pretty big blow by A&M to be able to come into the state of Georgia, get Bowie. You better believe that this is something that A&M fans are very much celebrating. They have seen the recruiting fortunes for Texas A&M rise here over the course of the last couple of years, and coming into Georgia and getting the pledge from Bowie, even if it's only for right now, that's going to stand as a big win for Texas A&M, and obviously the kind of thing that a lot of Georgia fans are really noticing. Another kind of interesting domino falling in this class of 2022 with Bowie going public with a commitment there to Texas A&M. Another guy that Bowie's commonly been linked to because of the cross-pollination of Georgia and Texas A&M is Bear Alexander. We heard Jeff on Friday's show in the subject of defensive lineman recruitment for Georgia saying that he didn't believe it was over between Georgia and Big Bear Alexander. And maybe proof that's the case is that almost simultaneously to Bowie announcing a pledge to Texas A&M, Bear Alexander comes out on social media saying that he's actually down to a final 2 that includes Georgia and Texas A&M. Let me show you this on the screen there from Big Bear. Of course, a Hayes Fawcett edit. We've seen a lot of those on social media. Big Bear sharing that when it comes to the Aggies uniform, the Georgia uniform. So this is one of those things where I think it's kind of funny that on the basis of the news from this weekend, it seems like bad news for Georgia with Bowie pledging to Texas A&M, good news with Bear Alexander naming Georgia as a part of his final 2 after having decommitted from Georgia not all that long ago. But if I had to guess, the actual most likely scenario at the end of this is still reversed. I still think it's more likely that Big Bear Alexander, unfortunately, ends up at Texas A&M. And that's obviously a disappointing thing for me because I like him as a player and I love him as a personality, but I think it's more likely that he ends up at Texas A&M. The honest truth is I actually think it's still more likely than not that Bowie ends up at Georgia more so than Texas A&M when that recruitment's all said and done. That's just my opinion, but that's the opinion that I have. But interesting that both of these recruitments that have kind of been a Georgia-Texas A&M type thing, they both kind of played out over the course of the weekend. Another recruiting note to get to you on, Jake Pope, the 3-star safety from Buford High School, is ready to make an announcement tonight. I think he's going to do that on local television, the Fox 5, I believe, local television in Atlanta. I guess Georgia is somewhat involved in this, but I don't think a huge player in this near the very end. You've heard some Alabama. I think, I've heard a little bit about Notre Dame here and there, but it sounds like that Georgia is not going to be the school from Pope. I'll probably still be kind of paying attention to this to see where he lands, but he does get ready to make his announcement pretty good player, very good player there from Buford, but probably not a Georgia from Pope to 9. At least that's the sense that you're kind of getting at the moment here. A lot of the online chatter has been Alabama, but I'm not quite sure, what to make of that, but that is kind of out there for right now. Another interesting story, and this kind of bubbled up on Friday, and the honest truth is I thought we'd actually probably spend more time talking about this than we're ultimately going to be able to. A report from Max Olson at The Athletic about a supposed alliance being formed with the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and the ACC to essentially combat the SEC. This is one of those things that could be done for the purposes of non-conference scheduling, but also could be done to kind of form a voting pact to basically work against the SEC. Almost all of this being treated as an act of retribution against the SEC for the decision to add Oklahoma and add Texas to strengthen that league. These leagues joining together as a way of protecting themselves. This is also going to be a factor when you move into, maybe you've heard some chatter about this, the NCAA constitutional convention that's about to take place. And no, they're not going to be wearing like powdered wigs and dressing up like Hamilton characters. There's, going to be some changes to the NCAA bylaws, big change to the way in which college athletics governs itself. And there are going to be some serious votes taken on that. This alliance, as was reported by The Athletic, going to be kind of an act of voting in favor of each other and potentially in some cases against the SEC. I think the reaction to some of this has been kind of interesting. Some people have kind of laughed at this and basically suggested the SEC has nothing to worry about on that. I'm not quite so sure I fully see it that way. I mean, I do think if these leagues join together, they do have a lot of power. And even if you kind of say, well, most of the schools in these leagues don't have the kind of individual cachet that the very best SEC programs have, or even the very best Big Ten and Pac-12, in some cases ACC programs might have. That may be the case, but I'm still reminded that the NCAA basketball tournament, which features a lot of teams without very much individual cachet, add all that together, it's still a huge TV property worth billions of dollars. I think a college football national organization that kind of functions the same way would also have, pretty strong cachet here and could potentially be a true legitimate competitor, whatever it is the SEC is trying to do. The other thing, that I'll, kind of say about all of this as it, kind of all plays out is I think it's probably way too early to kind of see exactly how all this is going to go for right now. But it would not surprise me if this ends up mattering more often than not. And I'll tell you one way I'm actually kind of rooting for it potentially is because right now the SEC is about to move into a world in which its television fortunes are totally tied to ESPN. In the very near future, CBS is out of the picture, and it's just ESPN as a television partner for the SEC. ESPN also totally controls the ACC, and they control the entirety of the college football playoff, at least for right now. One of the things that the Pac-12 has argued for, and I think the Big Ten's kind of in this discussion too, is, hey, the college football playoff is too valuable as a property not to have it negotiated on the open market. Let's see what other media partners could potentially provide us beyond just ESPN. And I kind of think that's true. I mean, I think a world in which ESPN is not the only media rights holder in the sport is actually probably a pretty good thing. Let me give you one specific reason as to why, and I'll make this quick. Did you watch the Field of Dreams game the other night on Fox, the Thursday night game between the White Sox and the Yankees that took place in Iowa in the Field of Dreams style cornfield there? That was an amazing TV product, right? It was a tremendous game, but the actual TV product and the way in which it tied back to the movie Field of Dreams was just terrifically done. Let me ask you a question for a second, for those of you that watched the game. Do you think ESPN could have pulled that off? Do you think ESPN was capable of producing something that looked as big as Field of Dreams looked on Fox the other night? I truly don't believe they're capable of doing that. In fact, I think everything from a sporting sense looks bigger and better on other networks. College football looks way better on CBS. The NBA looks way better on TNT. The NFL certainly looks way bigger and better on NFL, on NBC or CBS or the other Fox even. I think Major League Baseball just looks bigger on Fox than it looks on ESPN. For whatever reason, ESPN, though it thinks of itself as the worldwide leader in sports, it has a way of making the sports that it televises just seem smaller than the sports when they're on competing networks. So I'm kind of rooting for a competing network to eventually get involved in whatever happens with the college football world here. And if this alliance brings a player like Fox back to the table, in a roundabout way. I don't think it's actually a problem for the sport. Let me do a couple of other stories here. We're going kind of long, but I want to make sure that we get all this in here. So there was news coming out of South Carolina over the weekend. Luke Doty, the starting quarterback that emerged near the end of last season for South Carolina and was certainly the likely starter going into this year, he has hurt his foot in one of those center quarterback exchange things where you end up with a hurt foot. We don't quite know when he's going to be out, but apparently South Carolina fans were just beside themselves in disappointment when they heard the Doty news, so much so that Shane Beamer kind of, basically lashed out at what he called doom and gloom from fans who thought the season was now over because Doty was hurt. We don't know how long Doty's going to be hurt, but sometimes these things do have a tendency to linger a little longer than you might like. But Beamer went even so far as to say, maybe taking a page from Dabo Swinney's book, that it was, quote, bullcrap that South Carolina fans thought that the Doty injury is going to be that bad for the Gamecocks. So in this particular case, I've actually liked a lot about Shane Beamer since being South Carolina coach. I'm actually probably more with the fans on this one than I am Beamer. That I saw South Carolina play last year when Doty wasn't quarterback. It was not a thing of beauty. This could be a very concerning situation for the Gamecocks if Doty's missing any significant time there whatsoever. Also, and I skipped over this, and I apologize. Let me go. Sometimes I have a tendency to go out of order on my SEC through stories, but let me hit this one instead here. There's a little bit of drama for Kentucky at the quarterback position now. Will Levis was named as Kentucky's starting quarterback. That's a recent transfer from Penn State. For some people in Lexington, this wasn't a huge surprise. I think he was kind of thought of by some people there as maybe being the favorite. I had sort of assumed it was going to be Joey Gatewood, but I'm obviously a couple hundred miles away from Lexington, so it kind of shows you what I know. Gatewood, the former Auburn transfer, though, has now reportedly put his name back in the transfer portal again. So Gatewood, at one point in time, leaving Auburn and going to Kentucky was kind of a big deal, and now without really ever really getting a chance to have a full season to himself, Gatewood's now on the move again, and Levis, who's a pretty athletic dude, apparently he even played some running back at Penn State, certainly was a running quarterback while he played there, he is going to be the starter. And this is a guy that, some Kentucky fans were a little bit excited about. So if you're making mental notes here, the starting quarterback for Kentucky this year, not Gatewood. He's in the transfer portal. It is instead a Penn State transfer, Will Levis, so pay close attention to that. And then finally, let me just do this very quickly. There were a lot of other scrimmages around the SEC over the weekend, and a lot of chatter got generated from them. First of all, it sounds like Demetrius Robertson had a very good day for Auburn, catching a lot of balls, being used. It took him a while to actually get cleared to practice there, but it sounds like all that's happened in time for him to be out there, being a part of the scrimmage of the weekend. He earned some praise on that. LSU scrimmage took place. I think it's really interesting that Ed Orgeron actually gives out quarterback stats for both Max Johnson and Garrett Nussmeier. Sounds like they both had a couple of moments where they threw touchdowns. It sounds like it was also a pretty good day for the defense. Orgeron, very much complimentary, though, of the freshman wide receiver, Brian Thomas, who it sounds like they now think can really step in and play there. So Orgeron not really holding back on his praise of Thomas, which I thought was pretty interesting. Bryce Young apparently threw 3 touchdowns for Alabama over the weekend. It was a day in which it sounds like, once again, defense may have been a little ahead of the offense in Tuscaloosa, but it was at least good enough offensively that Bryce Young had 3 touchdowns there in that discussion there as well. So a busy weekend of scrimmages all around the SEC. Try to cover all of that for you, and hopefully you got all of that. If you have any questions, you can see me after the show. We'll make that your SEC through. So I mentioned PGA Tour golf a little earlier. Let me give a shout out to a dog on tour who got a great win at the Wyndham over the course of the weekend. Kevin Kisner, I think it was a 6-man playoff, which is very hard to play in a 6-person playoff. But Kisner goes out and gets the win there at the Wyndham over the weekend, and obviously setting himself up for the playoffs that are about to get going here, but also a little bit of chatter that maybe this is the kind of thing that gets Steve Stricker's attention to put Kisner on that Ryder Club team. Kisner's had some success before in match play type events, so maybe Kisner gets an extra look now for the Ryder Cup. We'd certainly love to see that as you start thinking about later on the month of September. Classic Old Shoe Golden Shoe today, by the way, as well. Our buddy Mad Dog kind of giving you the dog here, taking care of his business on the Gator-themed fire hydrant. That's old school, but it's a winner for today. Our buddy Mad Dog showing up on that. How about Gator Hater Countdown? Just 76 days from now, dogs get a win against those lousy, stinking Gators. We'll talk to you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door. And my oh my, that was quite a show. A lot to get to there for you on that. And without further ado, we'll dive in and get your comments. We can't go super long today because we do have a bunch of stuff we got to do, but we will we'll find out what you've got to say about everything that went down on the show, the Gilbert stuff, the rest of the stuff related to the offensive line and the offense, all of the things from the show, all of it on the table. We'll get it all right now. Let me go Facebook first, and as I do that, let me remind you, RS Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. Make sure you check out RS Andrews today. They'll get your air conditioning unit tuned back up to factory fresh specs. rsandrews.com for more on that. All right. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, Matt Rukavina asking about the alliance. As I said before, some people think this is a big nothing, but I'm not quite so sure I think of it that way. I think it's the kind of thing, I mean, here's the one thing. If you're trying to compete with someone in business, I think your tendency might be to say, hey, we got to be better than the other person. We got to be better than our competition. But the truth is, better is kind of always going to be in the eye of the beholder, right? I mean, better is a little bit of a loaded phrase. The best way to beat your competition is to simply be different from them. And so the SEC, which is by comparison regional, by comparison smaller, it's just 16 teams. By comparison, some of the SEC schools, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, South Carolina, are actually smaller alumni bases, right? The core fan bases are themselves a little bit smaller. So if you want to be in competition with the SEC, the way to potentially beat them is by being different. We have this national alliance. We've got, the entirety of the country, all 4 time zones represented. We've got gigantic, fan bases. We've got, a multitude of games because while Iowa State against Northwestern, let's say you play that as a non-conference game, that may not have a lot of individual cachet. A multitude of games like that, they are always going to generate more revenue than they cost. So I actually think some of the people who don't seem to think this alliance thing is that big of a deal, I think they may find out it's a bigger deal than they think, if I had to guess. Easy Brown says, without further ado, let me read a comment from Cody Ledoux. That's actually pretty funny, Easy. I like that. Pete Williams says, perhaps it's a good thing to hear nothing about Gilbert. You could always hear bad news. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there's something that's probably true here that just doesn't fit very well with our current landscape of college football. People are curious, and they're going to want to know. Arik Gilbert doesn't talk much to the media, right? I mean, if I called up Arik right now and said, hey, now of course, he's on the Georgia roster now, so you can't really do this as much. But if I called him up and said, hey, you want to come on the show and tell your side of the story and let folks know what's going on with you, Arik Gilbert would just politely decline. Throughout his recruitment and throughout his transfer process, a lot of folks reached out to him, and my understanding is in almost all those situations, he just kind of politely declined to answer, did not want to go public. It was largely assumed that he was just going to show up one day and be on campus, and that's going to be the story of his transfer. He is a private person. He has every right to do that. And certainly as he deals with what's been described as a personal issue, I mean, that makes his right to privacy even more, relevant here. He has a right to do all of this away from the watchful eye of the media. But the problem here is that there is an economy built around these football players, and people are just interested in what's happening with them. And so someone will always step in to fill the void of whatever Gilbert's choosing not to say about himself, or now that he's on the Georgia roster, what Kirby Smart's choosing not to say about Arik Gilbert. There's always going to be people step in to fill that void. And, some people are obviously outright lying. Other people don't know that they're lying, don't think they're lying. They're just saying what they heard from somewhere else. And that's just the way that it goes. I say this all the time. The appetite for Georgia information is always way up here. The availability of Georgia football information sometimes way down here. And the difference between here and here, that gap, there's always going to be hucksters, charlatans, grifters, people like that try to fill that gap with something. They're always going to try to meet the demand with their own version of information, even if the information they have is actually misinformation. There will always be people looking to do that. So if you want to know what's really going on with Georgia football, it's about knowing which rumors to ignore as much as it's knowing which rumors to pay close attention to. Our buddy Connor Riley stops by.
Are you more of a huckster, a charlatan, or what was the third term you used there?
A grifter.
A grifter. Which one do you see yourself as?
Hopefully not any of the three, but maybe at some point in time I've been called all three by somebody at some point in time. That may be the situation there. So look, Gilbert chooses not to tell his own story throughout his recruitment, throughout his whatever. He just chooses not to play the media game. He has every right to do that. Georgia, also kind of chooses, for the most part, to keep everything it possibly can in-house. They have every right to do that there as well. And I think both parties, both entities are comfortable with the choices that they've made. But the byproduct of that, it just makes fertile soil for idiots. And that's just all there is. That's just all there is to it. Let's see what else. Is it Capaga? Am I saying that correctly? Capaga? And I hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. He says, we all know that Kirby Smart keeps his cards close to the vest. Yeah, and he does. And obviously the problem with what that is that most of the time in the college football world, you can keep your cards close to the vest and you can control the narrative. But at some point in time, there are going to be eyewitnesses to whatever you've been saying and been going on. Honesty compels me to admit. Last year, the very tight, buttoned-up Georgia had practices behind closed doors. After the opt-out of Jamie Newman, we were told, wait till y'all see Dwan Mathis. I'm not picking on Dwan. Dwan's a good guy, and I'm rooting for him, at Temple to be the starting quarterback. But we were told, listen, no one's allowed to see Georgia practice, but those who are, boy, they are telling you some great things about Dwan Mathis. Eventually, whatever you say is happening behind closed doors is going to be witnessed by people with their own eyes, and that's also one of the things that kind of, is a little bit troubling about it, situation on Saturday. It's like you love to control the narrative and you love to keep everything in-house and basically keep whatever's happening a secret, but eventually, whatever has been happening with your program, whatever the current state of that program is going to be on display for somebody to see. All right, a couple of more here. Brian Williamson says, somebody knows something. You are giving us no information. I don't know if he's talking to me. I mean, the only information that is truly needed right here is that right now Arik Gilbert's not available to Georgia. I mean, that's the only information that's truly needed. And what else beyond that do you really need to know? If I'm sitting here as a fan, the thing that I'm thinking about is my favorite team going to be able to put together the kind of roster that's capable of going out and winning games like they're going to play against Clemson September 4th? That's the thing that really matters, right? And, frankly, the things that you saw or you heard, discussed, from Saturday, the Gilbert absence is only a small part of that, right? I mean, for the most part, we had Gilbert kind of pegged on this show going back for months as the kind of person you temper your expectations for anyway. I mean, I've said a million times that if you had Gilbert playing wide receiver, you had Darnell Washington playing tight end, I actually liked Washington to put up better, numbers because he was playing the more natural position. You had Gilbert learning a new offense, learning a new position, being a part of a new team. I mean, we have been preaching temper expectations for Gilbert for quite some time. In fact, even Terrence Edwards, who knows Gilbert better than anybody does, he himself has also talked about the idea of tempering expectations when it comes to Arik Gilbert. So as far as, what is the additional details about whatever the personal issue, might be, ultimately in light of what Georgia needs to do to beat Clemson, I think that's fairly insignificant. The thing to know is that right now, Gilbert is not available to Georgia. And the one thing we'd all love to know is, well, when is that going to change? And I truly believe that nobody knows the answer to that. And so ultimately, that's what probably matters more than anything else. Somebody talking about the idea that Arik Gilbert was the academic athlete of the week just 2 weeks ago. Once again, I got no problem with Georgia doing that. Was there some theatrics involved in making Gilbert the academic player of the month or whatever it was? Maybe so. I mean, there was maybe some theatrics involved in that, maybe a little bit of trolling and some of the people who had kind of, generated the rumor mill stuff. But here's the thing. Kirby Smart said in July that Gilbert was academically eligible. He was on the roster. So the people who said he was never going to be academically eligible, they've already been proven wrong. Now, as I said before, am I going to acknowledge that the academic player of the month or the player of the week or whatever it was that he was there some, elaborate theatrics and all that? Of course there were. But once again, if you're a Georgia fan, I don't know if you are or not, but if you're a Georgia fan, I don't think you got to be worried about the fact that people were mad about that, right? I mean, sometimes it's just about having a little bit of fun every now and then, and making Gilbert academic, superlative was I think that was plenty in bounds for Georgia here. The academics for Gilbert, I certainly don't believe were an issue, because if they were, Kirby Smart wouldn't have said that he was eligible when he did. Let's see what else. This is YouTube, by the way. DMart42 says, I hope most of us don't sound like this Bama or Roll Tide fool. I can be objective about my team at least. So apparently there must be some Bama trolling in the comment section. I don't know if it's our buddy G. Grace or who. Somebody has a YouTube handle of Clemson Pop Warner Conference LOL. He says, this is just the same old Kirby Smart spiel. We have 4 or 5 receivers hurt. One of our main players supposed to fill Pickett's spot is gone. Yeah, so kind of weighing in on that. I guess so. There's a new Alabama troll in here today. Frank Patterson says, please don't make the Gilbert issue the focus of every show this week. Frank, on this show already multiple times, I've said that when it comes to Georgia, the absence of Gilbert's not even the biggest issue from the weekend. And if you care about beating Clemson, if you care about being as good as you can be this season, the Gilbert absence wasn't even the biggest absence this weekend. But you're not going to be able to pretend, though, that it's not the biggest headline. It's the thing that got the most reaction. It's the thing that had most people talking. I mean, you can't ignore it, but you also, I mean, and it's not like had Gilbert been there on Saturday that I think we'd been hearing from those insiders or Kirby Smart himself about how much the offense, really moved and how well it was clicking. I don't think Gilbert, having just gotten to Georgia, has that kind of power, that kind of control over the program. I think he's just still too new to do all of that. Let's see what else. Croaking 123 says, so I guess they're having a debate about Georgia and Alabama in the NFL. So there you go. Jay Shipe says, the boring Facebook comments are putting me to sleep. Yeah, but at least they're on topic. Now, I don't mind the YouTube people debating whatever they want to debate, but, right now they're kind of in their own world on some of this kind of stuff. Johnny Lester says the Dogs' first scrimmage summary is dysfunctional. I don't know if it means that Johnny was there or if he just heard people say that. But as I told you during the regular show, it certainly wasn't seemingly fun, right? I mean, fun is, oh, yeah, this guy caught 2 touchdowns, this guy caught 2 touchdowns, and Georgia's just moving the football all over the place. With all due respect to the defense, that's, kind of what people want to hear. And it sounds like the Georgia offense just scuffled a lot more than that. And doesn't mean anything. It could all be different come September 4th against Clemson. But here's where the burden of proof for Georgia football, lies right now. Georgia has this burden of proof to show that this year's offense is going to be different than the last couple of years have been. And so when there is a scrimmage that Kirby Smart himself kind of described as kind of somewhat lackluster, the people that go online are like, oh, well, Georgia's not going to show anything anyway because there were donors there. We have been having people on the internet for going on 3 years telling us that Georgia's protecting its real offense for some date in the future. I mean, at a certain point in time, does the mind ever rebel against that as a talking point that, well, obviously Georgia's going to keep it really vanilla in a situation like this because they don't want so-and-so to see. And the team that Georgia's supposedly hiding its real offense from over the course of the last 3 years has a tendency to kind of change, but this notion that, well, there were donors there, Georgia's not going to show what its real offense is. This is also one of the few practices Georgia gets before it actually gets ready to play its game. I mean, they limit these practices you can get. You don't get an infinite number of those. So this idea that Georgia's not going to show anything, or it's not a big deal that Georgia apparently didn't have a very good day, as has been described by Kirby Smart and other folks who were there. The idea that doesn't matter when this is a Georgia offense that has the burden of proof to demonstrate that it's going to be better than it was the last couple of years. Boy, at some point in time, you just wonder, is there any room for skepticism at all? Robert Barnes says, I'll say it again, don't put Superman's cape on any one player. We need a close-knit team to get us where we want to go. And I think that Robert's probably right about that. That Gilbert was never going to be the one-man savior for Georgia football. It was never going to be able to be that. I think he's as impressive a high school prospect as I've ever seen. But we've also talked about all the ways in which he wasn't just going to slide into Georgia. And I'm not even going to use this in the past tense because I think there's still a chance that Gilbert plays this year. He's not going to just slide into Georgia all of a sudden put this entire offense on his back. It just doesn't work that way. We had some people, telling us that the reason why he's coming to Georgia is because Georgia promised him he could be the go-to guy. I can assure you that never happened. Let's see what else. Coach Egg says, did Georgia do any homework on Gilbert? Doesn't sound like it. I don't know about that. As I said before, I mean, for Georgia, this is an experiment worth undertaking. For Gilbert, a change of scenery closer to home with a program that has a history of doing right by its players, that's an experiment worth him undertaking. Maybe it's going to work out, maybe it's not. But if the only thing you risk is having some doofus on the internet like Danny Cannell say, see, I told you so, then you've really got nothing to lose by bringing a guy like Arik Gilbert onto your program. And you hope it works out for him here. But if it doesn't, your ability to move on from this is actually fairly limitless. You shake his hand, he shakes your hand, you just move on and do something else. Well, we tried it. It was worth the shot. This idea that somehow Georgia has lost something because Gilbert isn't here. I mean, it's not like the scholarship that Gilbert's occupying would be used by somebody else right now. So I got no issue with that. No issue with that whatsoever. Over on Facebook for a moment, then we got to get ready to go. Brian Lindsay on stuff here. Yeah, I mean, sometimes it is as simple as saying that it's a personal issue, and other people are going to try to exaggerate it, make it into something else. But I've got every reason to believe that some of the more salacious stuff out there is just flat out wrong. It's just flat out untrue. Lavelle Hughes says, is the offensive line going to be ready for this challenge? The honest answer is, Lavelle, I'm not quite so sure. I think Jamari Salyer playing center this close to the start of the season is not a great thing for Georgia. And that's not because I don't think that Salyer can be a great center. I think that Salyer can actually be really great at just about any position along the offensive line. I think he's that talented as an offensive lineman. But for a Georgia offensive line that already had its share of questions, moving Salyer right now, I would say is the need to move Salyer right now because of the injury to Warren Erickson. That's the kind of thing that you got to be paying very close attention to kind of compare this to the Gilbert situation for a moment. I think that Georgia can beat Clemson with Arik Gilbert. I think that Georgia can beat Clemson without Arik Gilbert. I don't think that Gilbert's the deciding factor for whether or not you beat Clemson. But a healthy, capable offensive line is a deciding factor. And if you're thin enough now that you're kind of forced to decide which of three positions does Jamari Salyer help us fill voids in, that's the kind of offensive line issue that you ought to be watching very closely ahead of the game against the Tigers. Not to say that it won't be answered affirmatively, that's not what I'm saying. But in terms of what can get you beat against Clemson, what's happening with the offensive line is a bigger deal than what may be happening with Arik Gilbert right now. That, I believe, is 100% true. Let's see what else. Brandon Griffin brings up an interesting point. Clemson did have a scrimmage over the weekend. I heard that was not a great thing of beauty either. I heard they had some real issues along their offensive line, and potentially, in particular, I believe some center quarterback exchanges. That was an issue, for sure. So I heard that it was not a great scrimmage for Clemson. Barry Watkins says, "Well, are we whining about Scott Cochran?" He says, "No, because it's always been next man up." That's true. I mean, I think the difference though is that, in the case of Scott Cochran moving away from the team for a while, there was this obvious big name waiting in the wings. I think, Barry, and you just got to be honest about this, some of the reaction to the Gilbert news from fans is, in terms of the pedigree of Gilbert, former 5-star, the look of Gilbert, someone who, just has, physical characteristics that most college football players don't have, there isn't an obvious next Gilbert waiting in the wings. But, finding a fit for Gilbert in the offense was still going to be a challenge no matter how physically gifted that he is. But that's why the reaction to Gilbert not being at the scrimmage on Saturday was more pronounced than the reaction to Cochran not being with the team going back to last week, simply because there was a Will Muschamp waiting in the wings. In this particular case, you really are left to decide, does Georgia have three receivers that it really trusts? The Pickens injury seems more relevant now than it seemed even at the end of spring practice when it seems like Georgia was kind of trying to weather that storm. There's all kinds of guys it could be, and some of those guys even had their moments and flashes all over the weekend, I'm told. But really having 3 receivers that you can trust to make this the kind of passing offense that gives you a shot to accomplish your end-of-season goals, that's why the reaction to this news is just a little bit different. All right, a couple more. Let's see what else. Kemple Lee checking in from Oklahoma City. Kemple, thanks for being here. Jan Armistead says the Clemson defense is going to be tough. Our offensive line must be prepared. I don't want that quarterback taken out. Yeah, that's right. And it's the ability to kind of establish some sort of pocket that just keeps the rhythm of the offense going there as well, which is obviously very important. Let's see what else. DMart42 says, I just want to know who JT can count on third down to be open and move the chains. And I think that 2 of the guys that are the most likely answer to that were guys that did not scrimmage apparently on Saturday, Karis Jackson and Jermaine Burton. That the list of who he's going to really trust, I mean, it really may be about those 2 names at the top of that list, and then it's simply a matter of, well, who else is on the list? Who else really emerges there in that spot? Chase White also mentioning Marcus Rosemy-Jackson and Brock Bowers, and all those are names we believe are in that discussion there too. But it's about moving past potential and actually doing it. I mean, it's about really, truly getting it done. And Rosemy-Jackson has shown me some things when he's played, and the buzz that's been out there about Bowers, I totally believe it. I buy into it. But now it's about actually doing it in a game. Let's see. Anything else? Nature Gator says, I miss some SEC stories. Yeah, we also went like, at a certain point in time, it's sort of hard to get it all in. But we'll see. But what we can always come back and do tomorrow we didn't do today. But at a certain point, it's just hard to get it all in. A Dog Fan 3 says Van Pran will be fine. He just needs reps going against the ones. That's probably true. I still think that Cedric Van Pran is this program's center of the future, but Clemson's not the kind of opponent to get on the job training. And, as much as Kirby Smart says that this time of the practice calendar has been about, camp and basically working on yourself, you only get so many practice reps. You really can't spend too many of those on true, player development. It's not like baseball spring training. I mean, you got to, now we're 2 weeks out from the Georgia-Clemson game. Georgia's got to get ready with a game plan that can beat the Tigers, and a young Cedric Van Pran getting that experience over the course of these practices. I just think that's going to be hard. I think that's going to be hard. Teresa Pope says, I'm going back and forth with people bad-mouthing Arik and assuming whatever might be going on. I hope Arik gets better. Yeah, I mean, look, people are going to say what they say, and you understand all of that. And I think you're right to want to defend him there in that particular case. I mean, look, if whatever Gilbert's dealing with makes him a bad person, as Danny Cannell said, character issues, things like that, then we're all bad people, because at least I am. I mean, maybe you can say, well, I've never had any kind of, personal issue at all. Well, congratulations, but I think most of us would say that, no, we haven't been there. I mean, yes, I've had things in my life that have made just showing up at work at times hard to do, that have made me not want to be a part of things that I very much enjoy. Yeah, man, I've had that kind of stuff happen in my life. And, when you're in the midst of that, it can be a hard thing to get yourself out of. Most of us can tell some sort of story about that, even if we're not really, maybe we feel like we're not really supposed to talk about it. If we ever did talk about it, most of us have some sort of thing we could say in regards to, to that. So I think you're absolutely right for saying what you say. All right, I promise we're getting off the air here. Hold on. Let's see what else. One more time on Facebook before we go. Isaac Cruz and the subject of having to block. I mean, clearly, Kirby has said that he wants those receivers to be a little bit better blocking in that second level here this year. But, the idea that anybody on the Georgia roster is not open and willing to do that, I mean, if they were, they probably wouldn't be here on this roster already. Jerry Popham, the subject of Demetrius Robertson. I mean, the word on the street coming out of Auburn over the weekend was that D-Rob had a pretty good scrimmage. I mean, that is true. The word on the street was D-Rob had a pretty good scrimmage. Randy Hall says Brock Bowers has some of those same abilities that Gilbert has. Yeah, when Monken talked about Gilbert going back to last week, he did mention Brock Bowers in that same sentence. That is true. Dan Carl says he's most concerned about the offensive line. I would say that's a legitimate concern right now. Baracus Mills, good to have you here as a part of the show today. Miriam Martin Corbin says, isn't it normal to have a questionable first scrimmage? After all, it's a new team each year. I think that Miriam's probably right about that, and I think it's important to note for the people who did get a chance to see it. You're still not seeing it in context, right? You'd have to watch every single practice, every single moment of the entirety of the offseason to really kind of know if the things that you're seeing in a scrimmage situation are reflective of the actual truth or just kind of a random fluke occurrence, because random fluke occurrences happen in football all the time. If so-and-so were to flash, like take Jamon Dumas-Johnson, for instance. We're going to talk about him at some point in time because, there was some chatter about him coming off the scrimmage, and that could have been, an example of a guy on his way to a breakout season, right? Or it could have just been a good moment or two happening in front of some people who had a chance to see it, that you'd have to see the entirety of Georgia practices to know which was which, and only the actual staffers and players get a chance to truly do that. So the bottom line is this, that the next couple of weeks for Georgia are going to be crucial, but you wouldn't expect it to be any different than that. And, maybe Gilbert's a part of this, maybe he's not, but ultimately the things that lead to a victory against Clemson, I don't think it really matters that much if Gilbert plays or not, because the questions being asked about Georgia won't change that much based on Gilbert's status. So you can wish him well on the one hand and start thinking about Georgia on the other hand, and if Gilbert does come back, allow that to be a pleasant surprise. But the big issues for Georgia are, as commenters have mentioned, can you figure out what's going on with this offensive line? Can you find some reliable, capable pass-catching targets to provide this offense the upgrade that it needs? And at some point in time, we'll figure out what's going on with the defense there as well. So that's what the next couple of weeks are going to look like. Fun time getting ready for the upcoming season. It is here. It is upon us. And you certainly get the impression that Georgia fans desperately need a game here at this point. So good stuff all the way around. Thanks for being here for R.S. Andrews podcast Cool Down. Y'all check out R.S. Andrews online. Actually, this is our video cool down. We'll do a podcast cool down a little bit later on. Either way, check out the R.S. Andrews online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised at the price that's promised. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.